and spending. I was just sharing with my discussants in the studio that at least in 2016, even under an IMF program, we're able to rein spending in. Is it something this administration can learn from and do a similar pirouette, if you like, in 2024? But let me come to you, Mark. So the cost of securing credit, it's become very costly. It's become difficult to secure on the back of the hikes in the monetary policy rate. What has been the impact of that? And tie that into the DDEP. How severe or mild has the impact of all of this been on the businesses under your umbrella, the GNCCI?
Well, I think it's been very severe.
Very severe?
Very extremely severe.
Break it down for us.
Because the private sector is highly exposed to government bonds. I mean, if you tell the banks and insurance are all private sector organizations, and you take a bank that has given acquired a bond for 9 billion, and giving the private sector 4 billion, definitely, if something should happen, then the bank is going to suffer. So most of the banks, in fact, the research that we did clearly indicated that about 50% of the total asset of the banks were invested in government bonds. And about 2/3 of their deposits were also within the government bonds. So we were highly exposed to the government bonds. Much as I would have loved for the banks to invest more in the private sector, I also blame the government for his high appetite for borrowing. In fact, we warned the government about the crowding out. When you keep
crowding out of the private sector?
Of the private sector. When you keep on increasing your policy rate, you keep on increasing the T-bill rate, a natural business person, for instance, like a bank, who would want to create value for shareholders, will be geared towards buying these government bonds. Already we were made, I mean, our economics book says that the government is risk-free. So instead of supposedly giving it to a risky business, they prefer to give the money to the risk-free government. And now the government is more riskier than the private sector. So it's also a wake-up call that you need to also be able to diversify and invest more into the productive sector. So the private sector is highly affected by this DDEP. The individual bondholders, most of them are business owners that have also invested in government bonds, seeking to get their capital and probably their coupons to reinvest into their businesses. The other institutions are also private sector businesses and holders. So by and large, we have suffered from this DDEP. Now, all the countries that have gone through the debt exchange, to a large extent, saw a decline in access to credit to the private sector. Prior to this, access to medium to long-term credit is a major issue. The banks prefer to give you the short-term, maximum 1 year, and the danger is that the private sector were also using this short-term facility to finance the long-term project, and paying it became difficult also for them. So with this, and given the level of exposure of these banks, it means their assets are going to be impaired, and the ability or the capacity of these banks also to lend to the businesses is also going to be affected.
You can't give what you don't have.
Yeah, you don't have it. So if I have invested in government bond, expecting that I'll get it in a year, then I have to wait for 5 years, and somebody is looking for money to invest in the agriculture sector, in the industrial sector, in the service sector, and if I'm a bank and I don't have it, there's no way I can give that money to the business that would want to invest. A mention is made of the stability fund. And I don't know how they are going to use that to support the private sector. I'm sure that is basically for the banks to be able to meet their immediate demand for deposits and other things. And that will mean that they're also going to be constrained in terms of the finances that they have. So definitely access to credit in 2023 up to maybe the next 4 or 5 years is going to be difficult because the banks don't have the money.
Blunt question, are some of your businesses close to folding up? Do you suspect that some of them will have to fold up?
Yes, because prior to even this, the environment was such a harsh situation for businesses. And now people will now have to now combine the issue of DDP with this harsh environment that they face in 2020, 2021, and then 2022. So some are on the brink of collapsing. But it's not so easy to wake up and say, I'm closing up my business, because people are depending on you.
Lives are tied.
Lives are tied to, you would want to keep the process going. You have a machine that is running, and closing that machine, probably bringing it back, will take you 3 or 4, 5 years. So what businesses are doing now is to ensure that at least they are sustainable over a given period of time. The challenges will be there, but we are hoping that we'll go around it. If you take Ghana, and the reason why it will be more difficult is that about 90% of businesses get their loans from the banks.
Right.
The stock market is let me put it, not so grown to the extent that people would want to go there and get equity. So they all go to the banks and get their loans. Now, with this, that they will not be able to go to the banks, a lot of them will be starved of funding to be pumped into their businesses. So the effect is that in the end, we are not going to get credit. Some who would have loved to expand will not be able to expand. It's only when they expand that they will be able to employ a lot of people. And definitely there will be job losses over this period that we are looking at. Difficult situation, but I think we need to work to ensure that...
We hope you'll be able to weather the storm.